Who y'all? I made it. Y'all, I took a little nap. Y'all almost did. Whoo! Best be glad that alarm was as loud as it was. I had it set for one time and I didn't wake up to 10 minutes later, y'all. I apologize. I'm here. I am here. So, since this is a snippet, let's just go ahead and get into it. All right, y'all. Let me tell y'all something. It's a mess. Let me get the right overlays up, please, people. Let me get the right one up. Here we go. I guess we can keep that background. Now it's so busy. I like it because it's so busy, but we just need our old standby. Let's go ahead and get it in. All right. If you're here, you haven't been following me. I have been dropping videos on Mr. Diddy Combs since, I don't even know when. So please hit that like button. Please share this video if you care. We're going to get into it. We're not going to be here any longer than need to be. But I did want to show you, if you have missed it or have been living under the rock, we got an apology video from Diddy earlier today. And I wanted to give you a little snippet of it. So let me share my screen. We're going to look at it at its entirety. And then we're going to talk about it briefly. If you want to hear more information about it, y'all go back to Kat Not Williams. We did do a little I did briefly pop up on her live stream, and we did talk about it there. I just want to put it in there because I just have a couple of things to kind of go over that has happened with the drug mule that was arrested a couple of weeks ago and what his sentencing is. And then I read Cassie's lawsuit up until the point of the incident at the Intercontinental Hotel. But what I want to do is I want to read a snippet of Little Rod's lawsuit. And I want to kind of juxtapose it from what we know from Cassie and what we can extrapolate into what's going on here with Diddy. Y'all, please understand and know that I'll cite my sources, but what I know is alleged. Also, if any of this information triggers you for any reason, I do have the hotline numbers for domestic violence and also the sexual assault hotline here. And if you need for me to put it back up, just let me know. I will more than happy to do that. Okay. Let's get into this. Let's get into it. I am going to share my screen. And let's hope that you can hear this. So here is Diddy earlier with his apology. I think I've watched it maybe 4 or 5 times. I'm going to watch it with you all, and you all let me know what you all think. Let's play. All right, y'all. We heard that. We will definitely go back to that as we need to get back to it. So there we have Senior Combs apologizing for you all seeing him in what he said was his lowest point. Okay. All right. What did y'all think about that video? I like I said, I've looked at it 4 times, and I've got some transcripts of what he says. So he says, it's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times of your life. But sometimes you got to do that. I was fucked up. I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I got into going to therapy, going to rehab. I had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry, but I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry. All right. So that is the apology that Sean Combs has put out there, because CNN exclusively broke that video of him stomping and mollywopping and kicking and dragging and just brutalizing Cassie on a video while they were at the Intercontinental Hotel at a stay there back in 2016. What do you all think about that? So I wanted to go back over that. That is what's prominent in the news. I did a little short live earlier. We went over it. Again, I was on Cat No Williams channel. We went over that thing, and she juxtaposed it from the his denials before, and how his apology now didn't sync up with what he said before. But what I do want to go over is we've got some news in regards to Brendan Paul, who was the drug mule that was arrested on the day that Diddy's two homes, one in Miami and one in Los Angeles, were raided. He was arrested. He had, from what I remember, a felony amount of drugs in his possession. The word was copious amount of drugs. So I wanted to go over what's going on with him. Now, you remember April or March, we had Little Rod come out with his lawsuit against Diddy, in talking about when he was making the Love album and the things that he saw and the things that happened to him. So I wanted to go over that also as I talk about this. So this is a Stunt Shows and Shenanigans snippet. We will not be here long, but I do want to kind of cover it to show how all of these things to me are starting to mesh. They're starting to mesh. You know, it's just like a seamstress putting out her pattern. There's so many different pieces to the pattern, but as the fabric is laid out, she's putting all the pieces on top right now, and it's starting to look like something. It's starting to look like a shirt. It's starting to look like a dress, whatever. So it's all these little pieces. So we've got Cassie's lawsuit as a piece laid out on the fabric. We have the two other young ladies whose lawsuits is laid out on the fabric. We also have Little Rod's lawsuit that's laid out in the fabric. We can't figure out, like I said, if it's a dress or it's a skirt, if it's a shirt or if it's a pair of pants. We can't figure all of that out. But what we're doing is that we're putting those pieces together and laying them out on this fabric and see what kind of shakes up. We also have the incident back in the day with Shine. We also have the incident being placed down there on the pattern, talking about how alleged they believe that Diddy had something to do with allegedly had something to do with the death of Tupac. We have that information being laid down. We have the information from Diddy's former security person. His information is being laid down on this fabric. Like I said, we don't have we can't figure out if it's a dress or if it's a shirt or whatever it is, but it's being laid out on this fabric. And so we're getting ready to see it. So let me share my screen really quick. I want to go over this People article in regards to the fate of Mr. Brendan Paul. Okay, here we go. So it says Sean Diddy Combs' alleged drug mule, Brendan Paul, will avoid jail time as he accepts plea deal. Paul was charged with felony cocaine possession last month. This is written by, it looks like Ileana Kaplan and Danielle Baker. All right. Sean Diddy Combs' alleged drug mule, Brendan Paul, has struck a deal, y'all. People has confirmed that Paul will avoid jail time following his arrest in March for cocaine and marijuana possession amid a federal sex trafficking accusation for the hip hop mogul. The 25-year-old has now entered a drug diversion program. Brendan has accepted the prosecutor's offer to permit his entry into the diversion program, which after the completion, the case against him will be dismissed in its entirety, said Brian Bieber, Paul's attorney, in a statement obtained by People. A representative for the Miami-Dade State's attorneys said that this was a standard offer to a non-violent defendant with no priors. On March 27, Paul, a former Syracuse University basketball player, was arrested on cocaine and marijuana possession felony charges. An affidavit obtained by People stated that he was taken into custody at Opa-locka Airport by Miami-Dade police, working alongside Homeland Security agents, who raided Combs' two homes around the same time that day. The affidavit alleges that Paul was arrested after he was caught with suspected cocaine and marijuana in his travel bags. Paul has previously been named in a civil sexual assault lawsuit filed by Combs' former producer and videographer, Rodney L. Rod Jones. Now, this is interesting. This word, let me see if I can highlight this word right here, videographer. That's an interesting word to me because I had not heard that before. I knew that he was a producer. I know he worked on that Love album that Diddy received a Grammy nomination or a Grammy award for. But what is this videographer? That's interesting, but we'll keep going. In which Jones alleged Paul was Combs' mule who acquires and distributes his drugs and guns. Despite the arrest, he did not appear to be connected to the I'll Be Missing You artist. Interesting. Attorney Bieber said that in a statement to People on March 27th, we do not plan on trying this case in the media. All issues will be dealt with in court. The Miami-Dade Police Department has no more comment on that matter. In April, he was charged with felony cocaine possession. However, according to court documents, Paul's additional felony charge for marijuana-laced candy was dropped. People confirmed that Bieber entered a plea of not guilty in a very brief hearing at the Richard E. Gerstein's Justice Building in Miami, Florida, on behalf of Paul on April 24th. We'll be dealing with this case in the courtroom, not the court of public opinion. At the time, a hearing was scheduled for Friday, May 17th. Now it has been canceled. Interesting. Young man, young Brendan Paul has gotten away with a drug diversion program. So he had two felony charges, one for the cocaine and one for the marijuana-laced candy. And they dropped that one. And if he goes into this diversion program, they will expunge this whole arrest, this whole thing on his record. Interesting enough, they kept the felony cocaine charge. Now, is that to hold that because they also need for him to speak on what's going on what his association is with Sean Combs? What are we thinking about that? Again, like I said, we are here. We are just placing patterns down. We're placing different pieces on this fabric to see what we come up with. So we see that he has been, for the lack of a better word, he's been released. So let's get into this. Let's get into this. I want to talk about this. Let me push this over here for a moment. Give me one moment. I think I have it queued up to where I want it to be. So I talked about wanting to make sure that we go back to Little Rod's lawsuit that he filed. So I have it queued up to where I want to talk about and read. And so we will read this information and then we will continue on to answer questions. But let me see who's in the house. Let me see who's in the building, because the reading of this this information may take a few minutes. So before I do that, I want to be able to see who's in the house and see what's going on. Please tell me it'll be live, because watching you laugh makes my day. We are live, not Memorex. We are live today, child. Can we have an extra credit session about the phantom of the Four Seasons Landscaping Company, aka the loser who owns Miss Ruby and her daughter plus $100 million, aka the troll of 9/11? Four Seasons Landscaping Company. Wasn't that something about Rudy Giuliani back in the day? I can't remember too tough. I don't know. That's the only thing that I can remember. And they had some kind of press conference in front of them. That I don't remember. Is that what it is? The cousin. Yeah, we could probably go over. I'd have to go back and do some more research on that one, but I'm open to it. 50 Cent, real name Curtis Jackson, wrote, "Now, I'm sure if Puffy didn't do it, he's innocent. This proves nothing." This is what his lawyers are going to say. God help us all. Child. You know, is 50 finna get back to being petty 50? Because petty 50 is something to behold. Something to behold. Hey, cat. All right, let's see what's going on. All right. I hear that the guy that did the BBL Drizzy song, um, the initial song, the one that uh, Metro Boomin did a beat over, he's done a bad built blonde body, whatever that statement. He's done a song on that one too. I know that you could probably find it online. All right, let me see. What was this? Because it is a mess, and once we get into this little bit of this lawsuit, it's going to be a mess. So let me let me share my screen. All right, I hope I have it queued up. Mr. Combs and Jay Combs solicits drugs and engage in illicit sex acts with minors and sex workers. I think that's where I want to be. That's the love of them. Let me just make sure. And this is what I was talking about, Mr. Combs and Mr. Blackburn and him putting all these little pictures. I appreciate the pictures, but some of these pictures look like we could have found them online. You could have just put them in an addendum in the back. We would have been fine. All right. I want to make, oh Lord. I told y'all I took a nap. And I went the wrong way, doggone it. Y'all give me 1 minute. See, that's what happens. I took a nap after Cat's live stream, and I had all of this queued up, and then for some reason, um, I've lost my place. Oh, I think I was at the first. Let me go back. I hate to come on here so ill prepared. All right, so we will read just a little bit because where I wanted to read, I wanted to read from the point where they talked about Mr. The drug mule, Brendan Paul. That's where I was trying to get to, and I had it. Oh, but anyway, if I don't find it, y'all charge it to my head, not my heart, and my good nap that I had. All right, so this is the first part of it. Tell you what, give me one briefest of minutes. I am going to give y'all a good little, a good overlay and some music, and I will get you. I'll come right back. Okay, give me one moment. All right, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to start from the pew pewing at the station, and we're going to go from there, y'all. All right, let's get this. All right, so it says here. Let me see if I can make this bigger. On or about September 12, 2022, Mr. Combs held a writers and producers camp at Chalice Record Studio at the address that you see on our screen. Present at this camp was Mr. Combs, his son Justin Combs, and Justin's friend named G. Mr. G is a 30-year-old tall African-American male. In addition to these individuals, other musicians were present at the camp. This writer has spoken to several musicians who attended the camp. One evening during this camp, Mr. Combs, J. Combs, and G were in a heated conversation. That conversation was moved out of the studio into a restroom adjacent to where Mr. Jones was sitting. Mr. Jones was approximately 2 feet away from the bathroom when gunshots rang out. Mr. Jones recalls hearing multiple gunshots. Mr. Jones immediately went into a state of shock and feared that he would be shot next. Mr. Jones genuinely believed that he would be shot through the door due to how close he was. After the shooting ended, a crowd gathered around the restroom, which is interesting because they went against all fight and flight things. They just stood at the door for shooting. If it was closed and they were that close to the door, people stood near the door. I don't understand that. I don't understand that. After the shooting ended, a crowd gathered around the restroom. When the door finally opened, Mr. Combs and J. Combs exited. G was lying on the restroom floor in a fetal position, holding his stomach and bleeding out of the his leg hip area. So that looks like he was shot back around somewhere over here. Everyone stood around looking upon G. Frustrated by the lack of aid to G, Mr. Jones dropped everything, ran to G, and immediately began placing pressure on G's gunshot wound to his stomach. As he was applying pressure on his stomach, Mr. Jones realized that G was gushing blood from another area near his leg hip. He decided to lift and place him to sit on the toilet. Mr. Jones asked the crowd to call the ambulance. Mr. Jones lifted G and brought him to the ambulance at the studio's front. At this time, Mr. Combs and Justin disappeared into another part of the studio. Mr. Combs gave strict instructions to inform the police that he had nothing to do with the shooting. He also forced Mr. Jones to lie to the police by telling him that G was shot standing outside the studio by a drive-by assailant. Let's see what's going on. Okay, this is some information. This is some stuff. I don't know. I should try to not let you see all of that. But Mr. Jones has several corroborating witnesses who spoke with this writer anonymously due to their fear of retaliation from Mr. Combs. They have agreed to speak publicly when subpoenaed. Mr. Jones has the clothing he wore that day and believes it may still have the stains and DNA of G's blood. The following are screenshots of the aftermath. This is what we see in the aftermath. Clearly, G was not shot outside the studio, as Mr. Combs instructed his team to report to law enforcement. Mr. Combs defended and defendants LR, MR, UMG, and CRS provided private security for the writers' camp at defendants' CRS. The security was porous and lackluster at best. The fact that either Mr. Combs and Jay Combs were allowed to enter the studio with guns and those guns were not confiscated by security is a clear breach of duty by Mr. Combs' defendants LR, MR, and UMG to protect Mr. Jones and other attendees of this writers' camp. As a result of this shooting, Mr. Jones is severely traumatized. Mr. Jones now suffers from PTSD, severe anxiety, depression, and insomnia. This talks about Mr. Jones being sexually harassed. We went over this before, but throughout his time living with Mr. Combs. Also, if you're new here, one of the things that Little Rod was, he was living in the home of Puff Daddy at the time of all of this. He lived in the home and he watched a whole lot of different things going on. So let's continue to go on what we're reading. Mr. Jones was sexually harassed and assaulted by Mr. Combs. Throughout his times living with Mr. Combs, Mr. Jones was the victim of a constant, unsolicited, and unauthorized groping and touching of his anus by Mr. Combs. I, I don't want to be that person, but I'm going to be that person. You think he meant the buttocks? Because you got to spread cheeks to touch the anus. You think he meant the buttocks? Either way, all of it's a mess. It's a mess. These events took place in LA, New York, and Florida, and the United States Virgin Islands. In addition to the unsolicited and unauthorized touching, Mr. Jones was forced by Mr. Combs to work in Mr. Combs' bathroom as Mr. Combs walked around naked and showered in a clear glass enclosure. As a heterosexual Christian man, Mr. Jones was uncomfortable with Mr. Combs' advances and expressed his discomfort to Mr. Combs' chief of staff, Christina Corman. KK responded to Mr. Jones, "You know, Sean will be Sean. You know, baby, Sean will be Sean. You'll be all right." KK also attempted to downplay Mr. Combs' groping of Mr. Jones, um, anus and genitalia, as friendly horseplay. Maybe they're meeting buttocks because again, you got to see the buttocks and you got to do the spread of the buttocks to be able to that anus and genitals as friendly horseplay, stating that those acts were Mr. Combs' way of showing that he like you. And in the words of Cat Yes Williams, you got to tell Diddy no. Mm, I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but let's continue. Despite these assurances, on several occasions when Mr. Combs began to undress and walk around in his house, KK would say, "Okay, I'm leaving now," and she would disappear. KK's hypocrisy is breathtaking at best or enabling at worst. Mr. Jones believed that KK aided and abetted Mr. Combs' assault of him and was working with Mr. Combs to groom him into accepting a homosexual relationship. Through these sexual deviant acts, one would say Mr. Combs has a pattern and practice engaging in such nefarious activities. This ongoing conduct shows Mr. Combs cannot be rehabilitated. Mr. Tones, it talks about him engaging him into gay sex. He was aware that Mr. Jones by using Stevie J. Now, if you're not familiar with Stevie J is a producer. He has produced a lot of hits for Bad Boy. He's known now probably in the past 10 years of being on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. He was on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. He also was married. I don't know if he's still married to Faith Evans. Faith Evans is a R&B star who was initially married to Biggie way back in the day. Stevie J was married to her. I think he's probably been married to her or was married to her for maybe like 2 or 3 years. So that who Stevie J is, and apparently Mr. Jones looked up to Stevie J. So we will see. We'll see. Where are we? Despite these assurances, okay, here we are. Mr. Combs was aware that Mr. Jones looked up to him and idolized music producer Stephen Aaron Jordan, aka Stevie J. Stevie J is an American DJ, record producer, and television personality. Stevie J was part of the Bad Boy record production team, The Hitmen. In 1997, Stevie J won a Grammy Award for his work on Puff Daddy's debut album. Throughout the late 1990s, Stevie J produced for several artists, including Mariah Kevin, Tevin Campbell, the Notorious B.I.G., 112, Jodeci, Faith Evans, Jay-Z, and Eve. Stevie J was one of the producers on the Love album. Mr. Combs used access to Stevie J and his knowledge of Mr. Jones' admiration of Stevie J to groom and entice Mr. Jones to engage in homosexuality. Mr. Jones went so far as to share a video of Stevie J, this right here. And from what I understand, this information right here was debunked. That was not Stevie J in the video, in this particular video that you see right here. That is not Stevie J. My understanding that is a renowned porn star. That is not Stevie J. So that has been debunked. So we won't read more of that. On Thanksgiving Day 2022, Mr. Jones was in Mr. Combs' house located in Miami, Florida. Young Miami and her female cousins were present. Mr. Combs was intoxicated, and this seems to have been a running theme. Now, he's intoxicated. Now, remember, this lawsuit came out this year. When we watched the video earlier of him going to rehab and doing all those other things, was that something recent as of this month, last month? Or was that something after he had done the brutality to Cassie? Either way, the inebriation and the intoxication and the offering of cocaine still seems to be prevalent. Now, remember, you had the drug mule that was arrested the same time in April. You had the drug mule that was arrested the same day that Diddy's home were raided, and the drug mule was arrested at the same airport that Diddy and his daughters, who were going on their spring break that time, he was arrested going in or getting ready to go on that plane. While using the restroom, young Miami's cousin burst into the bathroom and began groping Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones believes that Mr. Combs sent her in there to sexually assault him. As she entered the bathroom, she dropped to her knees and began to perform oral sex on Mr. Jones' exposed penis. Mr. Jones pushed her away and exited the bathroom. Young Miami's cousin did not accept Mr. Jones' rejection as she proceeded to follow Mr. Jones out of the bathroom. She started undressing and attempted to straddle him and have sex with him in the presence of Combs and his staff. Once again, Mr. Jones pushed her off. The following images are from a video of young Miami and her cousin, Mr. Jones and Mr. Combs. Mr. Jones and Mr. Combs on Thanksgiving Day, right before Mr. Combs invited Mr. Jones into the restroom to attempt to force him to take cocaine. Young Miami and her female cousin, who sexually assaulted Mr. Jones on Thanksgiving Day 2022. Throughout his times with Mr. Combs, Mr. Jones was transported from California to New York to Florida and the United States Virgin Islands. During this time, Mr. Jones was forced to solicit sex workers and perform sex acts to the pleasure of Mr. Combs. On or about February 4th, 2023, which was last year, Mr. Combs forced Mr. Jones to bring prostitutes and sex workers back to his home. Now, why is this important and why I wanted to go over? Because this kind of mirrors what Cassie's lawsuit talked about with the freak off, that he would get hire male prostitutes to come in and to join in the freak off where he would watch Cassie have sex with other men. And also one of the little particular things that would come off was they used to talk about the white fingernail polish that Diddy, if you were a woman that dated Diddy, you wore white fingernail polish because he liked to see the white fingernail polish. And this was in Cassie's lawsuit. He liked to see the white fingernail polish on the darker skin of the males that these women were having sex with. And if you do go back and look at the women that he has dated, if you look at pictures and particularly pictures that where they're standing next to Diddy, look at their hands. They do have on white fingernail polish. That's just a little tidbit. I don't. It was mentioned in her lawsuit. Let's continue. The sex workers that Mr. Combs forced Mr. Jones to bring back to his home. On or about February 2nd, 2023, incident, Mr. Jones believed Mr. Combs drugged him. Mr. Jones recalls waking up naked, dizzy, and confused. He was in a bed with two sex workers and Mr. Combs. He also recalls aimlessly wandering around the house with no clothes on. On another occasion in Miami, on Thanksgiving night 2022, Mr. Combs asked Mr. Jones and DeForest Taylor to enter the studio bathroom. He asked them for a $100 bill because he wanted them to do cocaine with him. Mr. Jones was scared, but luckily he did not have a $100 bill, so Mr. Combs waited a little later to do coke with young Miami. Later that evening, he required Mr. Jones to solicit set workers from Booby Trap on the river, located, and there's their address. Mr. Jones did also, uh, Mr. Jones did so, and Mr. Combs forced him to engage in unsolicited sex with these workers. And here is the Booby on the Trap by the river. I think this is a place where, I think it's dancers. I think that there's dancers there. Oh. As part of Mr. Jones' sex worker recruitment tool, Mr. Combs provided Mr. Jones with an exclusive bad boy baseball cap and required him to wear it to booby trap on the river as a signal to any sex worker he approached that Mr. Combs was in town and he had sent Mr. Jones to recruit him. Mr. Jones had no desire to visit booby trap on the river. Mr. Jones had no desire to solicit sex workers from booby trap on the river. Mr. Combs used his power and influence to intimidate and force Mr. Jones into soliciting sex workers from booby trap on the river. As detailed below, Mr. Combs used many tactics to maintain dominion and control over Mr. Jones. Apparently, these workers were accustomed to servicing Mr. Combs and would know that he was in town by the sight of the bad boy baseball. The following are Instagram profiles of two sex workers that Mr. Combs required Mr. Jones to solicit and have sex with at his home in Miami, Florida. Mr. Jones had no desire to solicit or have sex with individuals in the previous paragraph. Mr. Combs used his power and influence to intimidate and force Mr. Jones into soliciting and sleeping with these women. The following is the phone number of another sex worker that Mr. Combs required Mr. Jones to solicit and perform sex acts within his home. Mr. Jones had no desire to solicit or have sex with individuals in the previous paragraph. Mr. Combs used his power and influence. Okay, I need to know what he did. Mr. Combs used many tactics to maintain dominion and control over Mr. Jones. He promised him a Grammy for producer of the year for the Love album. He offered him $250,000 to purchase all the instruments he wanted. He promised him ownership of his $20 million property on One Star Island in Miami, Florida. He promised access to record label executives like defendants Lucian Charles Grange and Ethiopian Hab was it Hab Cameron? This man's name keeps coming up in a lot of stuff, y'all. He keeps coming up because this man right here's name came up in this Kendrick Lamar and Drake's beat. So his name is also coming up in this as well. Mr. Combs would often switch up his approach. He would go from promising Mr. Jones the world to threatening Mr. Jones with physical harm. Mr. Combs threatened to eat Mr. Jones' face and informed Mr. Jones that he is willing to kill his mother, Janice Combs, if he must, in order to get what he wants. So he wouldn't think twice to harm Mr. Jones. Is this why we don't see Janice? Now I know Janice is probably an elderly woman right now, but you remember at one point in time, you saw her any and everywhere with Sean, wherever he went, particularly when Sean Combs was dating Kim Porter, she was everywhere. When they went on vacation, she was on vacation. Wherever they went, she was with. So I don't see her as of probably maybe 10 years? I don't think I've seen her anyway, 8 to 10 years. I don't think I've seen her because everywhere where Diddy went, she was there. I don't see her as often as I used to see her before in the early days of when he was out here. Mr. Combs would often okay. Mr. Combs and Jay Combs solicit drug and engage in illicit sex acts with minors and sex workers. All right. So on or about July 2nd, 2023 in California, Mr. Combs had a listening party at his home. Present at this party was R&B artist Redacted, Jay Combs, sex workers, and some underage girls. The event began at 7 p.m. Mr. Combs requested female sex workers and required Mr. Jones to solicit them. An hour later, sex workers appeared. In addition to sex workers, there were at least 5 women in the crowd that were under the age of 16. Mr. Combs first forced all the women to drink Lace Deleon liquor. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs laced the liquor with ecstasy. Mr. Combs did not check this. That is something that Cassie talked about that she took that he had her take. Mr. Combs did not check the identification of any of the underage girls. So who checked who was checking the identification? That's a good question for me. Who was checking the who was checking to know that these young ladies were underage? And I know that you can look at some people and tell that they were underage. Please don't get me wrong. But that number should have been that number of young ladies, young girls should have been made aware. Was this a listening party where all ages was Mr. Combs' children in that? I'm wanting to get some more information about that. The presence of these underage women made Mr. Jones very uncomfortable. He attempted to leave, and Mr. Combs forced him to stay. Mr. Combs went so far as to take Mr. Jones' car keys to prevent him from leaving. After being forced to drink Lace Deleon shots, Mr. Jones began feeling lightheaded and recalls passing out and waking up at 4 a.m. the following morning naked with a sex worker sleeping next to him. Screenshots of a video from that night is embedded below, so it must have been right here. Okay. Okay, this one. Mr. Combs has since passed Mr. Jones to Cuba Gooding Jr. Cuba Gooding Jr. gets involved in a lot of different things. As you know, Cuba Gooding Jr. is an actor. He was the football player in Jerry Maguire back in the day, and I believe he won an Academy Award for that role, if I'm not mistaken. What was that, Barbara? Yeah, he uses mommy as a shield. Is that what that was? He couldn't have been doing all those things because he was a good mama's boy. It's my understanding that she was into some stuff too, uh, back in the day, and also, I mean, this is alleged, but they said that a lot of Sean Combs' assets and things like that are not in his name. He has them. I know that they had talked about having it in his mother's name, and from what I understand from Christian Combs' this record to the feds and 50 Cent, that his sister owns the house that's next door. So he's put a lot of his assets and things in his children's name, and he has placed things in his mother's name. I wonder is it if it's in his mom's name, and when she passes away, it gets dropped into a trust in which he controls until somebody else controls it. It's interesting. Sorry, I need clarification. Is there an actual artist known as Redacted? What was the name of the party guest redacted for the following? Now, I think it was mentioned later on they're going to give you descriptions of these guests, and then you can kind of make your own assumption as to who they are. Uh, I don't know if it's coming up or is it back in the filings, but there are descriptions of these particular artists whose names have been redacted. There's just descriptions of them, Barbara. But we'll continue. After okay, he took the keys, he broke up. Okay. Okay. Mr. Jones believed that Mr. Combs was grooming him to pass him off to his friends. This fear became reality when Mr. Combs was introduced to Mr. Gooding Jr. while they were on Mr. Combs' yacht. During the introduction, Mr. Combs suggested that Cuba get to know Mr. Jones better. Then he left them alone in a makeshift studio on the yacht. As evidenced by a video of which screenshots are embedded below, Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones's leg, his upper inner thighs, his groin, the small of his back, his buttocks, and his shoulder. Mr. Jones was extremely uncomfortable and proceeded to lean away from Mr. Gooding. He rejected his advances, and Mr. Gooding did not stop until Mr. Jones forcibly pushed him away. The following is a screenshot of the encounter with Mr. Gooding. Throughout his time with Mr. Combs, Mr. Jones was under an implied work for hire agreement. He was not compensated for his time living with Mr. Combs or for the songs he produced. As evidence, he was listed as producer for the following songs on the Love album's final release: Deliver Me, Stay Part 1, Reaching, What's Love, Stay a While, Moments, Need Somebody, Homecoming, and Tough Love. Mr. Combs and defendants LR, MR, and UMG all benefited from Mr. Jones' work product. They failed to compensate Mr. Jones for his work. As a result, Mr. Combs and defendant LR, MR, and UMG were all unjustly enriched at the expense of Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones attempted to work with Mr. Combs to secure his publishing and royalty rights for the work he completed on the Love album. Mr. Combs only offered Mr. Jones $29,000 for 13 months, thousands of hours of work, and 9 songs that made it to the Love album. Ironically, Mr. Jones was willing to take $50,000 and his publishing and royalties. Mr. Combs' self serving greed would not allow him to pay Mr. Jones an additional $21,000. Mr. Combs' deceptive business practices became so bad that Mr. Jones was left with no choice other than to make a public plea on social media for Mr. Combs to pay for his work. After publicly requesting that Mr. Combs do the right thing and pay him, Mr. Jones received an onslaught of threats and messages from Stevie J and Love Records A&R DeForest Taylor, and these were the threats. Can we make that bigger? I want to see what he said. All right, it says, "You playing? I'm in the studio." LOL, you're 100% liar and weirdo. Good luck. Number still the same. Number still same. Run into a nigga. Come talk to me in public or on a public podcast forum. According to Mr. Jones, Mr. Combs used his power and influence to threaten and intimidate Mr. Jones. According to Mr. Jones, Mr. Combs is very forceful and demanding. Mr. Combs does not take no for an answer. As detailed above, Mr. Combs threatened to eat Mr. Jones's face. In another occasion, while standing in Mr. Combs' bedroom, Mr. Jones was forced to watch Mr. Combs displayed his guns and bragged about getting away with shooting people. You remember on Cat's live stream, we talked about briefly of where he heard when Sean Combs heard that Suge Knight was in town eating at a diner. They all put their guns together and ran out to try to go run and jump the man when they were trying to figure out where he was. I don't know if he was in New York. I don't know exactly where it was, but they had talked about this thing. This is one of again those parallels to Cassie's lawsuit. On another occasion, while standing in Mr. Combs' bedroom, Mr. Jones was forced to watch Mr. Combs display his guns and brag about getting away with shooting people. Mr. Combs shared that he was responsible for the shooting in the nightclub in New York City with rapper Shine. He shared that artist and Mr. Combs' girlfriend at the time, Jennifer Lopez, aka J-Lo, carried the gun into the club for him and passed him the gun after he got into an altercation with another individual. Interesting. The shooting in Chalice Record student confirmed Mr. Combs' statements. The statements reinforced Mr. Jones' fear of Mr. Combs and strengthening Mr. Combs' dominion and control over Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones was terrified of Mr. Combs. He felt like he could not tell him so. Mr. Combs consistently made it clear that his immense power in the music industry and with the lawsuit, and Mr. Combs made it clear that his head of security, Fahim Mohammed, had the power to make people and problems disappear. Let me see the time. Mm. All right, so let's go right here. We're going to talk about under this thing says defendant Christina Quorum and the Ghislaine Maxwell to Sean Combs, Jeffrey Epstein. Is the Ghislaine Maxwell to Sean Combs, Jeffrey Epstein. And if you're familiar with Ghislaine Maxwell, she is currently serving prison time for being the person that would bring the young girls and the teenagers to Jeffrey Epstein on the island. What is it, Epstein Island down there in the Virgin Islands? Okay. According to Mr. Jones, during the 13 months he lived and traveled with Mr. Combs, he witnessed Mr. Combs display and distribute guns from his bedroom closet in Miami, Florida, and in Los Angeles, California, to questionable individuals dressed in all black. According to Mr. Jones, during the 13 months he lived and traveled with Mr. Combs, he witnessed defendant Quorum openly order her assistants to keep Mr. Combs high off gummies and pills. Defendant Quorum required all employees from the butler, the chef, to the housekeepers to walk around with a pouch or fanny pack filled with cocaine, GHB, ecstasy, marijuana, gummies, and Tucci, a pink drug that is a combination of ecstasy and cocaine. It was important to defendant Quorum to have Mr. Combs' drug of choice immediately ready when he asked for it. Defendant Quorum ordered sex workers and prostitutes for Mr. Combs. Defendant Quorum ordered and distributed ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms to Mr. Combs and his celebrity guests who were present at his rented yacht, in his homes in LA, New York, and Miami. On multiple occasions, defendant Quorum forced Mr. Jones to carry Mr. Combs' drug pouch against his will. As a chief of staff, defendant Quorum was instrumental in organizing and executing the RICO enterprise. According to defendant Quorum had the following individual execute the following tasks for the RICO. Stevie J recruited the sex workers and participated in freak-offs. Justin Combs solicited prostitute underage girls and sex workers, would engage in freak-offs. Brendan Paul worked as Mr. Combs' mule. He acquired and distributed Mr. Combs' drugs and guns. We have here Frank Santella worked alongside Brendan. While Brendan acquired and distributed Mr. Combs' drugs and guns, Frankie carries the money and pays for the guns and the drugs. Interesting. Uh, Moy Bond hires sex workers and and participates in freak-offs. So this is where we see Mr. Brendan Paul. Now we see what his role was. He acquired and he distributed the drugs to Mr. Combs. And then we have Frankie, who was the money man. He held the money. So when Brendan made the deals, he was the one that paid off the deal. So it was two people. The same person didn't have both the drugs or the money. Uh, let's continue. Mr. Combs funded and used his affiliation with local gangs and gang leaders who would frequent his home in LA and Miami to secure the drugs and guns he obtained and distributed out of his homes in LA and Miami. Defendants executed their RICO enterprise with threats of violence, threatening to eat plaintiff's face, displaying and distributing guns in plaintiff's presence, bragging about having law enforcement under control, bragging about murdering people, and bragging about bribing witnesses and jurors in the criminal case concerning the 1999 NYC nightclub shooting with Shine. Now that's very interesting and bold statement. Because if you're thinking back, that was 1999. So who was with him back in 1999? I'm not going to call the names. I'm not going to say sure because I don't have the thing. But that is a very interesting and bold statement to say that having the law enforcement under control, because we can see again from the video that we saw with Cassie, we did learn, and in her lawsuit, we did learn that Diddy had his people pay the people at the Intercontinental Hotel $50,000 for damages and for copies of the footage of what happened on that in that hallway back in 2016. Defendants executed their RICO enterprise with threats of isolation from the music and entertainment industry, parading powerful music industry executives such as defendants Lucian Charles Grange, Ethiopian Hab Tamarin, and at his parties filled with sex workers, minors, and illegal drugs such as ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and mushrooms. Defendant executed their RICO enterprise with threats of non-payment for work completed, fake promises of cash payments, producer of the year Grammy. And I wanted to come back to that. Do we need to look at the Grammy setup? Because I'm not sure. I know that they can be one-sided and all of this other stuff, but people paying for Grammys? Do we have some kind of situation where they're paying for Grammys, y'all? Because there's no way that Puffy can promise somebody that they are going to get producer of the year unless there's some things they're going on. Let's see. What did you say, Nathan? Let me pull this up. Would it have been a better idea for Little Rod to have had taken Diddy to court for sexual assault than the civil case? That's a good question. I mean, listen well. The statute of limitations is not over with. I mean, he still has enough time to do that if that is something that he wants to do. But I'm gonna put it back up here. Because he still can. He at this point, he definitely still can do that. He can definitely take him to court. He can definitely file charges for that. Because again, all of this that he's asserting happened in 2022 and 2023. possibly pay people to vote for him. Maybe. I don't think he would have. Okay. 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 That makes better sense to me because I was like, what are we doing? Because I do remember there was a scandal with somebody I don't know if they were paying for the votes, but they were making kind of promises and things like that. And there were parties and things that people were attending to, and they were schmoozing to get these votes. Okay. But yes, Nathan, I mean he's still within the statutes of limitations for that. In California, he's still within the statute of limitations. He's still within the statute of limitations in New York, and he's still within the statute of limitations of being down there in Miami. I'm not sure about the Virgin Islands because, like, they were, from what I understand, they were on a yacht. I don't know what the protocol is for that, but he's still within the statute of limitations. I mean, I think that he would be able to do that if he wanted to. Uh, and guaranteed access to future projects and a $20 million home on Star Island. This right here, I'm just going to tell you because this is where Diddy lives right now. He lives in that home on Star Island. Whatever he was talking, I really don't believe that he was going to give that home to this young man. I just don't believe it. I think he would give the home to Stevie J before he would give the I think he, because Stevie J, when I tell you someone who is loyal down to a fault, that Stevie J. I think he would probably give it to Stevie J before he would have given it to this young man. Mr. Combs is allowed to wreak havoc while living and traveling with Mr. Combs. Mr. Jones discovered that Mr. Combs has hidden cameras in every room of his home. I remember after the raid, there was pictures flowing around about how they went through and they went through all the little different rooms and stuff, and how the rooms were, trekked through, as I'm going to call it. And I do remember some spots there in the walls and stuff like that, they were kind of gutted out. So for me, that left credence that this was they were finding cameras somewhere, because I remember seeing you can tell the processing room where those cameras were located, the server room where those cameras were. I mean, the what do you call that? The servers were in. You could tell that they were in there, and all the little wires and stuff like that. But then you went into all these other different rooms, and you could see where there was some parts of the wall where like they had picked around and picked through, like there was like a little camera or something there, and then they had all these paperwork and stuff strewn over everything. Child, a mess. A mess. Mr. Jones believed that Mr. Combs has recordings of defendants Lucian Grange, Ethiopia Habtamarin, as well as other celebrity music label executive, politicians, and athletes. Upon information and belief, these individuals were recorded without their knowledge and consent. And as in the case with the homosexual tape of Stevie J and that Mr. Combs provided to Mr. Jones, Mr. Combs possesses compromising footage of every person that has attended his freak-off parties and his house parties. Upon information and belief, due to this treasure trove of evidence he has in his possession, Mr. Combs believed that he is above the law and is untouchable. My gosh. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs employs Jose Cruz as his IT director. This writer has spoken to several former employees of Mr. Combs, who's confirmed that Jose Cruz is the gatekeeper to all Mr. Combs' recordings. Upon information and belief, Jose Cruz intentionally hides behind the camera and from social media and the internet due to all the incriminating acts he was required to record for Mr. Combs. And so we're not going to go back in there, but because that says more than enough. We've been here an hour. That is more than enough. What are you all thinking about all the stuff that we had just gone over on this lawsuit from Little Rod and how it connects old Brendan with Mr. Combs and supplying drugs, and how he was arrested at the Apalaka airport on the day that Mr. Combs was about to take his daughters on their spring break trip back in April. Let me see what else y'all are saying. Let me see what else you all are saying. Special K. Is that the ketamine? Is that what they call it? Let's see. Ooh, baby. I sorry, I was channeling my inner Beyonce. Whoo, my goodness. Oh my goodness. Let me see. The Grammys, the Oscars, the Olympics, and the Golden Globes are all industry scams to make everybody feel better about themselves. They're just participation trophies for the artists and producers. Oh, Barbara, say it with your chest, child. Say it with your chest. I hope when Beyonce does get her album of the year, she gets up there and pulls a Halle Berry and tells the Academy to, oh Lord, as she walks off stage and makes it rain. She seems to, just my thing. They are very. She has won several Grammys, and I know that she has not won that album of the year Grammy. But it just seems like if she does not win that album of the year Grammy, she doesn't seem like she thinks that she has accomplished. But she's so accomplished. At this point, I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about it, but it seems to be very important to her to have that particular Grammy. Let's see. I do believe LaRod was SA'd. I also think there's more to this story. I think so too, because again, words like anus was used, and then I'm thinking, but you have before you can get to the anus, you got to hit the booty cheeks, and I don't know, and I'm not trying to sit here. It's not me making fun. It's not me doing any of those things, but you did raise and pose a good question about why not file in criminal court. All right, y'all. Mr. Combs has a lot. He's had a busy weekend, and I've had a busy weekend reviewing all this stuff of Mr. Combs, and I'm about to hit this. I'm about to hit the sheets, y'all. I'm about to go to bed. I took a brief nap to come and almost missed y'all. If I had not rolled over to the left like I did, you might not have seen me. Y'all have been in this chat trying to figure out y'all have been trying to figure out where I was, but I just wanted to go over that lawsuit. I just wanted to kind of go over all the little different things. Again, we do not know what we're building. I don't know if it's a dress. I don't know if it's a shirt. But what I do know is that we've got several pieces, several pieces of fabric. Of the pattern laid down, and it is very very interesting to see where we're going with this. Very interesting to see where we're going with this. Let me hold on just one moment. All right. Y'all, do we have anything else? Do you all have any questions or anything going on about these lawsuits? Uh, we're going to see in the coming days of what's going to be going on with Mr. Sean Combs and if any more information is coming out. I am interested into where CNN got their information. I'm surprised that CNN trumped TMZ for getting stuff like that. Usually TMZ gets the jump on information like this, but we will see. Is there any more information? I think he's bracing. I think that there's going to be more information coming out. What that information is, I don't know. I don't know. Um, I don't know. All right, y'all. This is my stunt shows and shenanigans snippet. Y'all, please tell a friend. Please join me for Stunt Show Shenanigans every weekends, usually Saturdays at 6:30 p.m., where I go over the news of the week and we determine whether it's a stunt, it's a show, or is it strictly a shenanigans. Y'all, please tell your friends, tell your kins, tell your coworkers, tell that heifer that you cannot stand that I am over here making these videos. And as always, people, bye-bye.